one area that's probably neglected more than anything else is water. They say the average swimmer would, would lose about 1 litre of fluid per hour.
Hey there, welcome to our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, could you please do us a solid? If you're enjoying what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and hit that subscribe button on your platform. It really helps us reach more parents, coaches, and youth in the youth athlete development scene. All right, let's get into this week's chat. Welcome back to the Inner Athlete podcast. I got a special guest here today. He's the head coach of Melbourne Swimming Club, Mr. Ian Pope. It's great to have you on board for this one.
Thanks, Trent. Thanks for having us.
Just give you a quick summary of Ian Pope. He's gone to 2 Olympic Games, I believe, 2000, 2008. He's looked after a lot of high-level swimmers, but he's had a very long career, and I'll hand it over to Ian to give us a quick summary of his illustrious career.
Illustrious career. Look, I could talk all day, but no, I have been coaching for 44 years now, and I feel it's a real blessing that I get to work with young people every single day. I still love what I do, and swimming has been wonderful to me. That I've been a part of young people's lives, and I did much travelling with the Australian team for many years, and it's been a great career, and I'm still loving it, and still many more years to come.
That's great. Then what's your current role with Melbourne Swimming Club at the moment?
So Melbourne Swimming Club is a fairly new club. We commenced almost 3 years now, and we're up to nearly 600 members. It's one of the largest clubs in Australia currently, and it's going really well. The focus really of this club was to develop young swimmers. Most of my career, I coached older athletes, and sort of for probably majority of my career, I had a group of sort of 18 and over athletes. So, it's been a focus of really developing young people for a long-term pathway, more than getting older swimmers coming in your program and trying to make major changes there. So the focus is really about developing young swimmers. I'm a big one about getting the swimmers from within and having your swimmers in that sort of younger age groups and developing them technically very well, and progressively over a long period of time to keep them enjoying swimming and loving swimming, and see how far they can go with it. And that's very much up to the individual, but it's young kids have a lot of goals and strong goals, and some are just mainly there to have a great time, enjoy the friendship, and like to push themselves. So they're all got different aspects that they're trying to get the best out of themselves.
Yeah, because I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. It's like developing your coaching eye and how to get the best out of your athletes, and when to push them, when to back off. First of all, how did you develop that, and then kind of like how do you apply it to today with the current crop that's coming through?
Well, that's probably the art of coaching. I often say to coaches that some young coaches coming into the program, there's so much you have to learn, and over time you gain that experience, especially that observation of the eye. And one of the key things is coaching is looking at the individual swimmer, of what they are coping with, how they're applying themselves, when they can't apply themselves, why aren't they applying themselves, what's going on for them. And sometimes you can just simply be looking at their mood states when they come in. Their heads down, they're not as chirpy as they normally are. Just asking a few questions could be an indicator of a coach before they actually get in the water in the process of training that something's going on for them. And then needs to look at external factors as a coach. That there might be other things, that might be school or parents or family or something that's going on for them. So we need to look at those areas. And so just simply asking questions and monitoring how they are as an individual. We also monitor them, some of the national squads on a daily basis when they come out of the gym, and I have Trent often tell me, oh, this one's a bit flat, or this one hasn't had enough sleep. So that sort of science behind looking at the individual, how they're coping with training. Because quite often a swimmer will say, yeah, everything's okay, everything's fine. But when they actually put it to paper or put it on the computer and we look at and monitor how they're coping, it can be a totally different picture. And so we look at ways that we can reflect on how things are going for them in many aspects of their training, their sleep, their soreness, their tiredness, how they're feeling, are they motivated, are they not motivated? So we have a bit of a questionnaire thing that sort of helps guide us as a group of coaches too within the club.
Yeah, because one thing I noticed, like sometimes we ask how someone's doing, they just give you like a default answer. But when
Yeah,
they've got, time to analyze, a minute or 2 minutes to fill in the survey before the gym, then we get a bit more of a snapshot and then have to think about how I actually am in this point in time, which enables us to ask those questions later on. Do we need to, back off a little bit? Or if they're not having enough sleep, do we need to put something in place or for them to have a further conversation with them moving forward?
yes,
Or is it a trend that we're actually seeing as well? And I think the best part of it all is we can see it over through a competitive cycle or through a season, because we know when they're out of season, they're freshened up, they're feeling pretty good. We know when they're in the middle of the season, they're going to feel a little bit more, I guess, battered and bruised. Training is a bit more intense, recovery is a little bit harder. But then as we start to see them freshen up, then towards states and nationals, we should start to see that mood swing in the right direction, and I feel like they're ready to perform, ready to kick in. And that's why we want to track it over a long period of time, because we know when things are going to get hard and we know when they should be starting to freshen up for when it really counts.
sure. I think that's the important thing is, I'll make decisions for individuals where by that their fatigue and tiredness and how they are, where I might just keep it a little bit more aerobic, or you're finding as a coach they haven't got the speed. And so I'd look at ways to change that. Maybe they'll just do a small amount, or let's leave it for that day and bring it on to the next day. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the art of coaching, really looking at ways that we can see the individuals. And for sometimes we might say, look, have the session off tomorrow, or it's about recovering. And I think one of the key things in swimming is looking at that aspect of recovery, because so many people are, especially young children these days, they're all so busy. They've got music, got this, they don't stop. And so there's got to be times where they recover, because there's some residual fatigue over a period of a training cycle and training years as well. And we need to take that into an account when we're looking at different phases of the training. So there's so many components we have to do to help support them along that pathway.
Yeah, because a lot of the time it's not about how much training they're doing, it's how much they can recover from that exposed training that they're getting.
Yes.
So if we're not
So one of the things we try to do is, sorry, Trent, what was that?
No, I think one of the things we try and do is like, are we putting them in the best position to be able to recover from that? So if they've got a lot of training sessions planned for the week or the month coming up, we need to know that they're doing some work on the front end to help facilitate the recovery, because that fatigue can be residual, and obviously we want that
Yes.
residual effect to start to back off at certain times as well.
So in a weekly cycle, in a yearly cycle, in different phases of the year, we'll have recovery periods, adaptation periods, what I call adaptation periods, where there's a lot of cellular changes that occur, which you want to occur. And that's one of the important things about training. We want to have a training overload, but there's got to be an adaptation period. And for younger swimmers, it's probably a bit different. For older athletes, the adaptation period can occur over a couple of days. So they don't need a traditional, 1 week to 10 days of an adaptation cycle like a senior athlete. They probably go somewhere between 3-4 days recovery. And then, so one of the ways that we would phase it over cycles would be to, have like 2.5 weeks of training, then have a 3 or 4 day, little bit lighter period. So they adapt from that training load. And so, they adapt pretty quickly. And even in a weekly cycle, we want to make sure that, there's 3 or 4 key sessions that they come to, that there's a period of approximately a day and a half. So when I do my main quality work, it would be on a Monday night, for example, and then Wednesday morning, a Thursday night, and a Saturday morning. So it gives them like a day and a half to replenish their glycogen. I see so many programs today, and I go and watch other programs or other coaches, that every session's half and half.
Hmm.
And that you'll probably get a faster result over time, but that then you don't see the long-term effects. And so I think that's so important that, there is recovery sessions, there's more aerobic emphasis, and there's those key quality sessions. So they replenish their glycogen. So the glycogen's full, like it takes quite a period. I mean, there's a lot of sports scientists would say it's about 48 hours to replenish your glycogen. So that would mean if a swimmer is doing a maximum efforts and they're doing a really tough session and they've depleted their glycogen, their main source of energy for the session, it will take a good day, day and a half to replenish that glycogen, and then you can, work them hard again. So that's something that as a coach, we look at the cycles and how making sure they recover. Because sometimes it can be their own busy lifestyle doing other sports and that sort of thing that can also cause a bit of fatigue moving into each training phase.
Yeah, then I wanted to talk about that. You spoke about the coach's eye and this and the art of coaching. What do you see like the three most common areas that young swimmers really struggle with? Like, what's really holding them back, making that next
Yeah.
step? Maybe it's going, they're swimming okay at states and getting those national times potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's well, the key one for me is the recovery. They make sure they are recovering and not just training harder all the time. It's finding a good balance. When you sit down with young swimmers and you sort of say, "What's your goals for this season?" and they sort of share what they do in the week. For a lot of young swimmers, they just do not stop. And I think there's got to be times out where they sort of have a session or maybe midweek or on a Sunday where it's complete recovery, where they're just chilling. So many kids spend their weekends, it's going from swimming, homework, 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 homework all weekends, and then they go back into Monday's training and they haven't really had given themselves a chance. So I think for young swimmers, one of the key areas is how well you recover. A lot's got to do with nutrition, but how well they, even if there's a 20-minute window after a training session or after a main set, that you'll recover so much faster if you can get some fuel into your body. And so, just the importance of eating within a 20-minute window. If you wait an hour before you eat, so if you do your training session and then you head off, and by the time you actually get home and have your dinner or whatever the case might be, it's around 50% slower recovery process. So we need to be mindful of good nutrition, stretching, all those various things that helps the recovery. And there's so many areas that getting enough sleep, I think probably, one of the biggest struggles with young people is they stay up later and then maybe caught up with social media things. But, the more I come to understand that these young swimmers really need to make sure they're getting a good 8, 9 hours sleep, and they need to be in bed by 9 o'clock or 9:30, and some of them at 10, 11 to study, and then they get up at early hours of the morning. Some of them 5 o'clock. We start in the pool most sessions around 6. So if they get, depending on if they're traveling, but really they want to be making sure they're getting those good couple of hours, 8, 9 hours every day to help them recover faster. And so the importance of sleep is crucial. It's probably another key point, and just finding good balance that in their lifestyle, that they've got to find times to be chilling and doing nothing and just watching a movie or spending time with the family or catching up with friends. And so those sort of areas are probably the biggest struggle for young people. It all comes down to how well they're recovering so they can cope with the training. And some swimmers will manage that very well, and then some other swimmers is like, they're not managing that well, and you'll see some fatigue set in and can sometimes end up, having some sort of problems with sickness or something else. The body sort of says, "Hey, you haven't given me enough rest. I'm going to take a rest." And
Yeah.
so sometimes that can be what occurs.
Probably a couple of things that I've seen, especially coming on board with Melbourne Swing, is some swimmers are very proactive in their approach now. They're actually looking a day or two ahead. They're looking at, if I'm going to have a double session plus gym, it's like, what do I need to be doing the day before in terms of a fuel strategies and getting enough nutrition on board? What do I need to be doing in training as well? There's a few of them now. They've got, electrolytes and some carbohydrates, fast acting carbs. If they're doing swimming an hour and a half, 2 hours, it's really that back end of the session where you see a real dip in performance if they're not haven't got an adequate amount of fuel on board as well. So seeing a lot of them get 30 to 40 grams of carbs during their sessions that enables them to be able to maintain that level of performance from the start all the way to the end is actually going to put them in a better position, not just from a performance perspective or an adaptation perspective, but be able to recover to the next session as well. Because you mentioned if they're
Yeah.
not getting some level of nutrition in, relatively close to their training session times or finish times, it really does delay the ability to recover, which extends that window of time, and time we can't control, but we can control how fast we actually recover between sessions. I think that's probably the key thing that a lot of the I guess some of the older kids are starting to learn that now as we have more conversations with them. It's good to see a lot of them are coming in with, like, fruits and, having, sandwiches, before training as well, before the gym, which is perfectly fine. um, to make sure they got a little bit of fuel leading into their training sessions with yourself.
Mm.
Um,
Well, Trent, you've been instrumental in educating the swimmers and starting to get them aware of these sort of areas. It's going to help that process of recovery. And one area that's probably neglected more than anything else is water. They say the average swimmer would would lose about 1 litre of fluid per hour. Now, uh, I don't know how factual that is, but that's something I read many years ago. But to think that you've got to have 2 litres per session, if they're doing a double session on a particular day, I don't think many of these swimmers would be doing 4 litres of fluid as a minimum requirement. So, the importance of having a water bottle and not just having a water bottle of water, but also having electrolytes for that. Generally, after an hour and a half, there is that need to have electrolytes because they're sweating out a lot of the key minerals. And so, it's important that they have 2 water bottles and have enough fluids for that particular session. And some swimmers do sort of say they find it hard to drink water, and I get that. And so, maybe rehydrating directly after the session can help support that in their program.
you know what? I had my guys do a presentation, I think it was last year, and it was all about water and or water loss from training.
Right.
Swimming is more unique. There is a greater water. Yeah, no, it's more unique, and because of the humid environment and that you're literally in a body of water, you don't actually feel like you're losing fluids. So that's
True.
one
Mm.
reason. And then the other reason, if you're a warm environment, and plus your body has to self-regulate when you're going in and out of the water, and especially for competitions, when you're warming up, then you got to cool down, then you race, then you got to do your cool down again. Your body has this constant flux of self-regulating its temperature. So they lose a lot of water throughout a competitive, whether it's a competitive season or competition day, training less so, but they definitely lose a lot more water compared to like a soccer player or a boxer or any other sport along those lines. It's very unique because there's a constant regulation of the water temperature to the ambient air temperature, and because it's a humid environment if it's indoors as well. And usually it's, some of these competitions, if it's a 1 day competition, could go, you have a morning and you also have an afternoons or evenings where you got finals as well. So you're losing a lot more fluids than the average
Absolutely.
athlete, especially if it's over like 8 to 10 hours window
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
The one thing I do find as well, if kids actually approaches it in more of a smarter manner, eating, lots more fruits. Fruits do contain quite a lot of water content as well. So if they really do struggle in that sense, that's an easy way to actually improve their water content as well. So going for those like high, um, like watermelon, cantaloupe, those types of fruit, they're going to get water in and some carbs in as well and some minerals.
Yeah, great.
Very easy.
Absolutely. And so many swimmers, once or twice a year, ask the swimmers to get a blood test and just to make sure that everything's okay. And so one of the things that often comes back, the swimmer's dehydrated. And they just, so even just getting that message, they're generally low in iron and so many factors that can have an influence on the way they're training. If their iron, is what takes the oxygen through to the blood. And we just, especially for young developing swimmers, they really need to make sure their iron levels are up at a very good level. So, it's important that they're getting a blood test, once a year or maybe twice a year if there has been some issues the first time around.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we talked to some of the swimmers about that specifically, especially if their energy levels are constantly flat, struggle concentrating in class, just taking basic information in and they just feel little bit more pale consistently. Then we'll say, get a blood test, see what's going on. Then we can put some sort of intervention into place moving forward. Um, and then where do you see swimming in Australia moving forward? So what do you think is the future for swimming, even with the youth side as well?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think swimming's going to grow as a sport. More and more people are getting into, coming into swimming because it's non-contact. Probably one of the best forms of exercise because you're not having problems of on a hard ground and contact sports. So I think there's going to be a real growth in swimming. There's no doubt about that. And Swimming Australia is seeing great growth in swimming. I think one of the things that's going to make it really take off is making it more fun and enjoyable and creating an environment. For a lot of swimming competitions we go to, they can be long meets, and especially for parents who want to watch their child, and they might be there for 8 or 9 hours. Well, there are a lot of sports now. Say, for example, you want to go to basketball, you just need a ball, and it's exciting, it's fun, and it's all over in 1 hour. But for a swim meet, we've got to make swimming a little bit more interesting, and a lot of sports over the last couple of years have seen rapid growth where they've looked at ways they can reduce the amount of being involved. Say cricket, for example, they're having 20 overs now and having the new ways of playing cricket now instead of a five-day test match or something. It's more interesting, and people are, today everyone wants excitement, wants it fast, wants it quick. And I think for swimming to move forward, it's got to be probably more team orientated as well. Create some teams, and there was this international competition that was going on based in teams, and mainly through Europe, and it was so good to watch. It was spectacular, and people love being associated with a team. We know how popular football is in Australia and so many of these other sports, and I just think we need to look at ways we can create more of a team environment within the sporting arena of swimming.
Yeah. And then what's some tips or advice that you would give parents as well? So obviously we've spoken about youth athletes or the youth swimmers specifically in terms of what they can do. It's like, how can the parents, you've had thousands of conversations with parents. How can the parents better put their child, or what are like 3 tips of putting their child in the best position to succeed?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think one of the key things, the more you can instill the ownership that they swim because the swimmer wants to swim. If a swimmer hasn't got the heart for swimming, then they're not going to apply themselves, and they're not going to get the outcomes, and they're going to dislike it the more you try to push it. So one of the things I've often asked swimmers is, when they get to that period where, look, I want to have a break and all that stuff, I just say, take a break. See where your heart is, and I've said that to so many swimmers. I think I had a girl, Gian Rooney, who won an Olympic gold medal, and she come to me with that same thing. 6 weeks she had a break and said, I was done with swimming, and I said, what's in your heart? What is it about swimming that keeps you in that sport? And whether you really love it. And she came back to swimming and said, yeah, I still love it. And I think that's really important that they enjoy what they do, and it's something they want to do, and the ownership is based on them. Yeah, and she stayed in the sport for many years, went on to some Commonwealth Games. She became a world champion after that. We had a different focus. She became a gold medalist as part of the relay for Australia. So, there's times when it's okay to have a break, and see where your heart is in swimming. Some other things I'd probably, from a parent's perspective, sometimes we all do it as parents. We want the best for our children. But I think one of the key things is they're not swimming off fear and expectations. If we know that a young child is absolutely given their absolute best, that's all we can ever ask on a given day. And sometimes our performance is not going to be what we wanted. as a parent. And going into a competition in the back of their head, I hear this a lot with parents, or I hear it from the swimmers. They said, oh, my mum said that if I don't do this, I'll have to be pulled out of swimming, or if I don't achieve this, if I don't beat this person. And really, they're racing on fear. And for some people, maybe that might work, but really, ultimately, if they're swimming meet after meet and they're fearful of what the expectations and they're focused on outcomes instead of focusing on the process. When they come into a race meet, they really need to think, okay, this is what I want to do here. I'm going to swim this particular way for the first half and this way the back half, and break it up into segments, and having clarity about how they need to race. But if they're swimming there, and if I don't win this, and I mean, we don't have any control over any other athletes, how they're swimming and compared to you. So you've got to be totally focused on yourself. So I think as a parent, sometimes we can come away and we go, oh, what happened there? And, but I just think as a parent, they need to know that they still loved no matter what the outcome. And sometimes we can be a bit too tough on them. So that's probably one thing. It makes swimming enjoyable. How can they enjoy swimming? We try to do a lot of team building stuff. We don't just do swimming. We've had experiences last year where we took them away on team camps where we didn't do swimming, where we did mud runs and all these activities that builds a team spirit. And so the more that they can enjoy what they're doing and love what they're doing, I think that's pretty important. And yeah, building that sense of ownership. I think swimmers need to be totally take ownership of their outcomes. Do they get themselves out of bed? Do they do the things that's right to have their gear ready? The more you can instill that ownership into the actual individual athlete, the better the outcomes will be long term. And they'll give more heart to it. And it's sometimes hard. Sometimes I've got to take a back step and, not be too much in their face and sort of expecting things where they've got to own it. And, some swimmers, I might just let them be for a while and not to be too hard on them if they're not coming to the sessions and that sort of thing. So, sometimes it's finding a good balance that they can enjoy and get the most out of their swimming. It's a challenging sport. It's the greatest thing you can do as a parent is please see that the swimming is teaching the most unbelievable life values. Swimmers, when I see them in their 20s, 30s, even in their 40s now, and they come and see me, I might see them, or I might be having their own children swim with me at a later stage. And when they express what they learned from swimming and how they went on to do things of teaching themselves life values, of challenging themselves. I mean, these young people get themselves up early, they push themselves. Wow, what are they learning? They learn by mistakes. They learn to set goals. They learn to challenge their body, to challenge themselves, to go through those life things of the tough times and the hard times, and to overcome obstacles. And so the key message I'd want to say to any parent or any swimmer is really that, just keeping it. It's what they learn as people, and they're going to end up great people. I don't see many swimmers later on when they're finished swimming and they're past their years of applying all those hours in the water. They come and they've learned some great life skills and become great people. And I think that's what we want to instill as coaches, and that's one of the key messages I'd like to get across to parents.
Sweet. And that was a really great answer. I liked it. Just to wrap up, where can the people find you? So they're listening to this. I've got a child who's interested in, becoming a part of MSC. How can they get involved?
Okay. Well, we have swimmers of all levels. We have swimmers as young as 7. And so we have various different squads. We have some squads in Geelong. We have a number of squads in Melbourne. We have a program at Bendigo. So, but really, if you go to our website, it's melbournesc.com.au, Melbourne SC Swimming Club, and you can simply look at all the information there about the club and what we provide, and then you can simply just fill out a form that we're interested in trying, and you come along for a trial, and there's no cost or anything. You might take 1 or 2 sessions to feel, yes, this is right for me, and this will work out well in our time slot. So if anyone is interested, yeah, we're always keen to have new swimmers, and if anyone wants to come along for assessment, fill out the form, and we'll get straight away in touch with you and organise a time to have an assessment. We've also started a swim school as well, so younger people that's looking for some learn to swim opportunities. We're based out at St. Catherine's in Toorak, so any people that's looking for some high level teaching, we've got very small classes there and something fairly new. It's on top of creating a squad type program, so that's available as well.
Sweet. All right. Thanks for your time, Ian. Really appreciate your insights over the last 44 years of your career as well. And it's been so far so good in terms of working with you, and getting these kids up to a really high standard, and just kind of like setting MSC as like the bar for for Victoria and also for Australia as well when it comes to swimming clubs.
Yes, well, we end up second as a swimming club in Victoria at the recent state championships and the age championships. So for a small club, it's been well, it's not really small now, but really it's the numbers that we've got there. It's great to see that we're able to develop to that level, and nationally we had 35 swimmers go to nationals. So we're excited about the future of these young swimmers we've got coming through. We've got a great group of young swimmers coming through, and so yeah, it's an exciting time for the club.
Cool. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Trent. Thank you.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.